Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Sunday everybody. This is a special extra episode for the week. Of course, the big news around the world today is the attempted assassination of former US President Donald Trump. China woke up to this news and the state is still preparing its own views. On Monday or Tuesday, we will examine how Chinese commentators have responded to this news. For today though, because it's the weekend, this is typically watched by a more core audience, so I wanted to do something a little different. Examine a recently emerged cultural political phenomenon, a nihilism which the state seems deeply concerned about. In the last week or so, we've seen on social media in China this new notion of so-called garbage time of history, sourced, perhaps erroneously, from Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian school economist and historian. As outlet The East is Red, spelled R-E-A-D, explains in a piece published yesterday, the term describes a period of prolonged decline, characterized by stagnation and inevitable failure, akin to the final, inconsequential minutes of a sports game when the outcome is already determined. It reflects a time when a society or state appears to be in irreversible decline, with its political, economic and cultural systems failing to adapt or progress. Despite individual or cultural efforts, the overarching trajectory remains downward, governed by entrenched power structures and economic mismanagement. The Soviet Union's final years, from the invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 to its dissolution in 1991, are cited as a modern example. The East is Red goes on to explain, for individuals in China, the garbage time of history means a sense of disillusionment and powerlessness, as larger historical forces render personal efforts seemingly inconsequential, leading to recurring failures in their aspirations for a prosperous life. As veteran China analyst Bill Bishop observed on Friday, quote, "It appears that discussion of history's garbage time and its obvious criticism of the current state of affairs has started to get the relevant organs worked up. The idea of history's garbage time has become a thing like lying flat. One article back in February from the Economic Observer made clear the use of the phrase is really about complaining about the state of things in the Xi era." End quote. With the explosion of popularity for this phrase online in recent weeks, this week several high-profile articles from both state media and influential commentators pushing back against the concept have been published, suggesting deep concern for what Beijing has deemed a narrative trap. I think examining these rebuttals gives us a look into an aspect of the Chinese culture wars and social anxieties for some in China. Today we will examine 3 of these articles. One is translated by The East is Red, the other 2 I have translated. The first is from a former state media journalist, now a popular influencer, Ming Jinwei, called "The so-called garbage time of history is an absurd fantasy of ignorant literary youth about present-day China." As we read these, we note the political zeitgeist within the wider culture. We note too the deep social and political concerns which these authors are seeking to push back against. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Sharing and subscribing is also a huge help. Let's look at this first piece. Quote, "In China, the term literary youth, 晚清, once held a positive connotation, similar to public intellectuals, 公知. However, in the internet age, these terms have evolved into labels used by netizens to mock those who challenge mainstream views. The literary youth is no longer merely art-loving individuals, but are seen as a group deeply influenced by bourgeois liberal ideologies. They idolize bourgeois universal values and fantasize about transplanting these values and even political systems to China. When ignored and mocked in real life, they often retreat into small circles, indulging in self-pity and self-admiration, believing themselves pure while deeming others corrupt. In reality, bourgeois universal values serve the bourgeoisie. Take the United States, for example. Its democracy doesn't mean rule by all people, but by the bourgeoisie. Understanding this context clarifies the term garbage time of history, used by these literary youth. They believe China is deteriorating and unable to effect change as mere individuals choose to lie flat and wait. They see today's China as doomed and view this period as garbage time of history before the country's total failure and the arrival of their imagined new world. This seemingly harmless phrase conceals numerous political fantasies. In essence, they reject socialism with Chinese characteristics, exaggerate China's economic challenges, and highlight individual tragedies as evidence of the country's failure. They cling to the illusion of a peaceful evolution or color revolution to bring about their dream life of so-called freedom, democracy, and prosperity. As someone well-versed in history and Western economic theories, I find their views astonishingly naive. Their judgments about China and the world are so detached from reality that their visions for the future aim to overthrow socialism with Chinese characteristics in favor of neoliberal capitalism, which has failed even in the West. End quote. The second piece is from state-run Beijing Daily, called History's Garbage Time, True or False. Quote, recently the term garbage time of history has become a trendy phrase, with heated discussions surrounding it. Various motivational articles and short videos on this topic are flooding the internet, and it seems everyone has something to say about it. To use another term, it is full of emotional value. If it were just about gaining popularity in traffic, it might be tolerable. However, as the term is repeatedly manipulated and fermented, it seems to take on a different flavor. Some people use it to lament the country's development, implying that the environment is too bad and individuals have no choice. They suggest that lying flat is the way out, indirectly denying and belittling everything about contemporary China. Thinking back carefully over these years, from economic retreat to development reaching its peak, from China's collapse to overcapacity, there have been too many similarly pessimistic and gloomy judgments and predictions. There are always new bottles to hold old wine, and the only constant is that they all end up being proven wrong by facts. This newly emerged so-called history's garbage time, through an obscure academic concept, has placed ordinary people in a trap of grand narrative. Coupled with the typical emotional output of the internet, its inflammatory effect is indeed profound and mysterious. End quote. And finally, we have a piece from Wang Wen, Executive Dean of the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China, called Garbage Time of History is a fraudulent academic concept. And again, as we examine this piece, we really get a sense of just how concerned some elite have become about this new concept gaining widespread popularity. Quote, talking about the garbage time of history might be acceptable if it is merely to vent or joke around. However, inciting the notion of garbage time of history is indeed deeply malicious. The fleeting life waits for no man. We cannot allow more people to lie flat in helplessness, abandon themselves to despair, and muddle through life aimlessly. Instead, we should inspire action, resilience, and a commitment to overcoming challenges, ensuring that each individual contributes meaningfully to the progress and prosperity of society. This fraudulent term, under close examination, is even more dangerous than the recent lying flat theory. It completely negates the current development of China, attempts to create a public expectation of the country's inevitable failure, and includes a mindset of non-cooperation, non-effort, and inaction among the populace. In fact, compared to the insignificance of individuals in the long duration of history, truly responsible intellectuals would never encourage people to fall into this narrative trap, one that convinces them a certain moment is insignificant in the course of history. Instead, they would motivate everyone to believe that this is a critical historical moment, worth overcoming, surpassing, and rising from amidst the noise and illusions. We note here that even the commentator is admitting that the current period of time in China is one in need of surpassing. We continue with the quote. From the perspective of the leadership of civilizations, Western civilization, which originated in the age of exploration, is experiencing an unprecedented decline in nearly 500 years. Politically, the so-called liberal democracy stemming from the British Glorious Revolution, the French Revolution, and the American War of Independence is facing its greatest skepticism in nearly 300 years. The transformation of the international power structure is accompanied by a series of structural subversions, epical surpassings between the East and the West in commodities, currency, brands, information, knowledge, systems, and even race and ideology. In recent years, I have also shared my personal experiences. Over the past decade or so, I have conducted research visits to about 100 countries. Increasingly, more foreigners are willing to pay for or provide platforms for the sharing of Chinese knowledge, whereas years ago, hardly any foreigners would fund lectures by Chinese scholars. More and more Chinese brand cars are running on the streets of overseas cities, whereas a few years ago, Chinese people were still complaining that Chinese car manufacturers couldn't even make a proper engine. More and more foreigners greet each other with ni hao, whereas for many years, Chinese people were often mistaken for Japanese, Koreans, or Singaporeans. Amidst profound changes unseen in a century, we are on the path to the great rejuvenation of the Chinese race. Such a great critical historical moment cannot be tarnished and distorted with the term garbage. However, it must be acknowledged that the frequent citation, evaluation, and circulation of the term garbage time of history in recent months does reflect the emotional resonance of many people and the social philosophy during the economic downturn. This precisely highlights an extremely important and urgent task that needs to be implemented and reinforced. China's reform should never have garbage time. End quote. Okay, that is today's special episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Sunday, have a restful weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow.